I'm going to take an impromptu minute here and not only thank Sanford as a team organizer, like he built a great team, and we should be acknowledging that repeatedly across the day. But above and beyond that, I also want to acknowledge and thank Diane, because Diane applied for the job to be maestro of the orchestra, right? And so all the violinists have always been in step with every one of the string instruments and vice versa, and we just owe them a round of thanks and applause. So somehow I was bestowed the opportunity to try to represent a lot of Objective 4, and this will just highlight a few pieces of that. You can see a lot of the players that we had involved over the Objective 4 efforts that span not only the economics, but also the sociology of the entire project. We worked at all three institutions, and we tried to partner a lot with ARS, and so I'm going to highlight a few of those things. But if I've forgotten anybody listed here, please help me note that so we could get that into the final that'll go into concrete on the web. So just earlier this week, I wanted to contextualize this with part of the human equation that we're all thinking about dealing with in the news media all of the time. It was not a huge part of the REACH project, but the fact that the human beings in the landscape, who are the eaters of all the food that we're really trying to focus on in terms of food security and what the production of this landscape is all about, there was a poll that just ended 3 days ago that's showing the evolution of the perspective among the consumers, among the citizenry of who we're really trying to feed. And this is in the context of our changing political climate. And if you're not aware and haven't been tracking these numbers over the course of our proposal to get this project funded and then to conduct it, these numbers are shifting. The concern is going up, the awareness is going up, the metrics are continuing to show that. And so the latest data are that the majority of people are understanding the need for concern and that more needs to be done. So in that context, Objective 4 was really trying to help focus on not only documenting what are the key metrics for producer operations, but producer perspectives on risk management in order to sustain those, trying to ask producers the what ifs about what is changing and what we could model into the future, and then tons of different ways that we went about trying to measure the economic boundaries and limitations of all of those aspects that we were measuring. So almost everybody in this room participated in an effort that was within Objective 4. I had never tried to organize a social survey across 83 scientists interested in having a piece of the effort and seeing if they could gain some synthesis data out of that. But we accomplished that. So we want to try to start to just reveal some of the results of that to highlight a few of the key findings from our efforts in that regard. So one of the things within that large survey effort, which then became longitudinal, was we were asking a lot about perceived risks and trying to be able to compare those and put those in a context of climate change. So if you look at these different measures of risk, such as cost of inputs, long-term drought, fewer days of frozen soil, even throwing climate change policies into the mix of how do we compare risks if you're a producer, we see on this scale of risk from I don't know, meaning we had some folks indicating fairly I don't know the risks, to perception of no risk over on the left side of the scale, and then all the way up to high risk. So you can see there's quite a number of the producers who are indicating high risk for quite a few of those, with the cost of inputs obviously being the highest risk indicator, but also climate change policies and long-term drought clearly following right on its heels. So one of the things that we gain out of this project is, even though our measures tell us that many of the producers are not convinced that climate change is an anthropogenically driven situation, they definitely understand the weather is changing and they definitely have been adapting, and they're definitely cognizant of the fact that these issues are long-term and that they're happening in the landscape and that the adaptation needs are there. So we have a lot to go on in terms of continuing the extension work, continuing the synthesis work that this project has started. To try to dig in a little deeper, one of the key questions on the survey that we're planning core products in terms of journal articles out of is focusing on trying to understand environmental risk and economic risk. So just putting those two measures in this chart here, we clearly see that economic risk came out to be a greater concern compared to environmental risk. And both of these are somewhat normal distributions, but more skewed towards the economic risk. We tried to, in this project, map these data. My team didn't have all the skill sets needed to continue advancing this on every step within our timeline, but we're not giving up. And in coordination with others, especially Dave's group, we're going to continue to advance this. This is an early effort to try to create a spatial component to social survey data, which is rarely done because social scientists in my field are not trained within GIS to be able to think this way. But this project's proposal was telling the world, we're going to push into this zone. We're going to accomplish this, and it's not rocket science. So this at a county level is trying to map these data as to where in the landscape are these risks distributed differently in terms of the perception of the growers. So these were data that we were presenting at the International Conference in Minnesota a couple years ago. And then we tried to advance that, beginning to integrate these data into the agroecological classification systems that Dave just presented on as those have evolved. The agroecological zones were the metric that we used on the surveys. And so we collected the data in those contexts, but as that's advancing, we're continuing to try to analyze with the more dynamic perspectives that Dave is continuing to advance within his group. I guess one of the ways to try to make sense of what these data can help us understand is if perhaps these variables in terms of what the producers think about X or what they might do about Y could be a lot of that 24 to 31% that is not showing up in Dave's model, right? If you got a 69% to 76% based on X number of bioclimatic variables, maybe the socioeconomic variables are taking up a lot of that other percent that is not explained in those models. So we need to continue to work on these. So the last couple slides, I want to show you a couple key outcomes. If I can invite Laurie Houston up, I think she's going to be the better one to explain the next slide that's a key outcome from some of the work they did.
So when I first started working for REACCH, I was also brought in to work on the Northwest Climate Assessment. So I quickly gained a lot of knowledge about the basics of climate science, the impacts that we were going to have in the Northwest, and I wanted to incorporate some economics with this information. And so when Oregon State came out with a request for proposals to do online open access learning modules, I said this is a great chance to create a better awareness of climate change and make it open to not only academics but also the general public. So the idea of these, we came up with 3 modules. One presents the basic science. You go through these modules and there'll be video clips from different scientific reports and some basic information from journal articles and such, and just bringing out the awareness of the basic science. And then the next one, which is completed, is the climate change awareness for impacts, adaptation, and mitigation. And most of that module is based on the IPCC reports. And we incorporated some of their videos in here. And the third one kind of brings it all together in terms of economics. How does economics play a role? How can economics be used to look at the trade-offs involved with different management practices and using economic incentives in terms of taxes or subsidies and things like that. And so 2 of these modules are now complete. The third one, all the content is there. It's just being developed by the web designers. And this will all be available on the REACH website and through OSU. And we're hoping that these modules will actually serve as another resource for undergraduate classes to point to for incorporating climate change into whatever curriculum they have, whether it's economics or science or sociology. So we're hoping that this will become a good resource for those people.
Thanks, Laurie. So the last substantive slide, I want to highlight something else, and it's also really highlighting a partnership that emerged just within the past 8 months, I think. We have a new collaboration, as Chad mentioned in the press conference just a few minutes ago, with the Climate Hub in the Northwest, and Gabrielle Roche McNally, who's a partner on the project and actually was a student and collaborator in one of the other CAP projects, and then we got the fortune of her joining our project as we've been moving through some of the synthesis projects within REACH. She brought a vision to REACH that, quite frankly, should have been there from the start, but wasn't from what I had proposed, but we had set things up. And then that combined with Eric's skill set and expertise on how to manage data, we've been working over the past few months in order to create a product that you now have and is on the web. That's the REACH Statistical Atlas. So it presents a lot of the data in this format. And I just wanted to let everybody know, if you haven't had the chance to access that, it's a 30,000-foot view of a lot of the producer data. So it's selected results, but again, it's putting it into a spatial representation within the production region and trying to highlight some of the key measures about what's happening. So thanks for, again, the time to be able to share some of this with you, and we'll be happy to answer any questions in the panel.